What's going on, Jeromes? Now, we know that we are the pontificator of purple positivity, the PPP. But the Vikings allegedly are 1-4, and no matter how you slice it, just because the Vikings beat themselves in the games, just because the Vikings easily could be 4-1 or 5-0 in these spots if they stop turning the freaking ball over. It just sort of is what it is. And with Justin freaking Jefferson up on blocks for the next 4 games at minimum, with a hamstring injury, the Vikings could be looking at a tough decision when it comes to the trade deadline coming up after week 8 on October 31st on Tuesday. So the Vikings may, in fact, be sellers at the trade deadline, which is really unfortunate. But if the Vikings can get some value, some players who may not be back next season, it makes sense, right? So I understand, like, we're all positivity, baby. That's right, and we're never going to stray from that. But it is what it is, and the Vikings could make some business-type decisions coming up, and let's take a look at a few of them. So a couple of Vikings trade candidates, as well as where they could potentially land. Number one, so everyone's going to talk about Kirk Cousins. I don't see it happening, and because we outlined in that previous video, I don't see Kirk waiving his no-trade clause. I don't necessarily see ownership or Kwesi getting value for him either, because right now, I mean, everyone talks about the Jets, the Falcons, but I think they're going to stick with their respective quarterbacks, and barring an injury to a quarterback on a contending team, which knocking on wood, never root for that. I just don't see it. Like, I just don't see where the Vikings find enough value in the trade market, and Kirk Cousins sees it as a logical landing spot where they both turn their keys and launch that nuke. So I don't think it's going to happen. Next up, number 2, wide receiver KJ Osborne. So I fully understand that, hey, with Jefferson out with injury, trading KJ would be weird, but Addison is clearly the guy right now, and with Osborne in the contract year, and probably not going to be re-signed because the Vikings potentially would want to get a look at Jalen Naylor if he comes off of injured reserve, or Lucky Jackson, or Tristan Jackson, or Brandon Powell. I mean, Osborne could have some value, and even though he's had a down year, he's proven that he can be a rock-solid, borderline wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. Kansas City makes a ton of sense, and frankly, I think that I would trust KJ over most of Kansas City's receiving core right now. Maybe Rashee Rice is developing and growing and showing, but I trust him over Tony. I trust him over Justin Ross. I trust him over MVS right now. So Casey would make sense. Carolina would also make sense too, but also I don't think that Carolina necessarily would be buyers at the trade deadline since they're having such a dismal season. Next up, number 3. Left tackle Ezra Cleveland. So we put down left tackle because on his next contract, that's where he's going to play, because that's where the money is. That's what he was adept at coming out of Boise State in 2020. And with the Dolphins, so the Dolphins suddenly are having a ton of injury issues, and notably their stud left tackle Terron Armstead just went on injured reserve. And I mean, Ezra, he can play guard. he can play guard, but it's a spot where even though yes, Tua is a left-handed quarterback, so left tackle isn't as important as with a right-handed one defending that blind side. Ezra's got the footwork. He knows all the technical stuff and could be an asset in Miami right away. And also, since Miami runs a lot of outside zone, he would be a plus in the run game as well. So that one does make sense, since I think Miami should be all in on the season. Despite the setback against the Bills, I think that they could be strong Super Bowl contenders in the AFC. Next up, number 4. Defensive tackle Harrison Phillips. So, yes, Harrison Phillips does have 2 years left on his deal. He signed through 2024, signed a 3-year deal last offseason. But it just seems like, I don't know what it is, where we've said this since he signed here, where he's great and a versatile defensive lineman, but he's not a nose tackle. And that's where Flores constantly seems to want to deploy him. So I don't think it's a proper fit, but Pittsburgh, they're getting back on the horse. They've had some injuries in the front 7, notably Cam Hayward is on IR, and I do think that the traditional 3-4-5 tech defensive end, like they have in Pittsburgh, I think that's his best spot, and I think that is where he could slide in the Steel City. Also, reunited with Patrick Peterson. Go ahead. Also, Sean Sullivan, I think. Next up, number 5. Edge rusher Danielle Hunter, a first-round plus to the Saints. Ay, Dios mío. So this one hurts. This one does hurt. Also, it's ironic since the Vikings signed Marcus Davenport and the Saints didn't really replace him. But Peyton Turner, second-year edge rusher, he's hurt on IR. Cam Jordan, he's fantastic, but he can't play forever. And Daniil, it could be a spot where a team that trades for him doesn't necessarily have to be in the playoff hunt. And New Orleans is sort of whatever at this point, but it could be whatever team wants to sign him to a long-term deal. They secure his services for this season and then go from there. Now, would a team want to give up a first-round pick right now for Daniil Hunter? Maybe, maybe not. Or they could just wait until free agency since the Vikings can't tag and trade Daniil. I don't know. But if there is urgency and also if there's a demand for Daniil Hunter, who has 6 sacks on the season, I think there certainly would be, then premium's going to go up. Price of the brick is going up. Next up, number 6, Viking who could be on the trade block, Marcus Davenport. So just like Daniil Hunter, contract year. Marcus Davenport, contract year because he signed a 1-year deal. And he just showed enough in the Carolina game that he's interesting. And you're looking for a mid-round pick, 3rd or 4th round, somewhere in there. And the Raiders are Max Crosby and everyone else. And, Chandler Jones having his personal issues. Teams parted way with him. Malcolm Kuntz is nice with the Raiders, except Davenport would be an upgrade. So, if Vegas does see themselves as potentially pushing in the West and pushing for a wild card spot, getting some premier pass rush would make sense. And Davenport, we've seen, like when he's healthy and on, he can be that dude. And then go from there. Next up, edge rusher DJ Wonnum. So, the thing about the Vikings edge room is that Hunter's in a contract year, so is Davenport, and so is Wonnum. I don't necessarily see Wonnum signing a second contract here, so getting what you can get for him at the deadline would make some sense and also free up some snaps for guys like Patrick Jones II, who is under contract for another season, as well as Andre Carter II, the UDFA, obviously getting some work. But Wonnum to the Falcons does make sense. He's from the from Georgia. He's from the outskirts of Atlanta. Also, Bud Dupree and Arnold Ebiketie, who's one of my favorite edge rushers from a couple years ago in the draft. They could use some depth. Ryan Nielsen and company, they could use an additional pass rusher, and DJ Wonnum could find himself a nice home, going back to Georgia. And lastly, linebacker Jordan Hicks. So Jordan Hicks is in a contract year. Remember, he signed a 2-year deal last offseason coming over from the Cardinals, and now he did a revised deal. But Buffalo's had a bunch of injuries, and Matt Milano going down is huge for them. That's really unfortunate over in London. So Jordan Hicks has been fantastic this year, man. He's been fantastic as a leader. He's been fantastic making tackles in the open field. He's been solid in coverage too. But he is older. I don't necessarily see him part of the future. So the Vikings getting a late round pick or a late round pick swap upgrade for Jordan Hicks, who has an expiring contract, could make some sense. But I hope that it does not come to that. I hope that the Vikings get off the schneid. They beat the Bears' ass. They have a good showing against the Niners, and they beat the Packers' ass. And by the time the trade deadline comes, they're like, nah. Well, they see me rolling, they hating, and then Justin Jefferson will get healthy, and then and go from there, man. Hopefully that's the case. But your thoughts are thoughts. Take a look at 8 trade candidates for the Minnesota Vikings, if it comes to that. Let us know your thoughts and our thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe for daily Vikings takes. Want to support the work? Put a little something in the Venmo. But till next time, Skol, production value.